It was March 27th, 1945. The war in Europe was entering its final, desperate months. The American Third Army, under the relentless command of Lieutenant General George S. Patton, was driving eastward across Germany. Their objective, the city of Aschaffenburg, a vital stronghold on the Main River, defended by the battered but unbroken remnants of the German Wehrmacht. On the outskirts of the city, a single stone fortress, Schloss Johannesburg, stood as the last bastion of resistance. Inside, Oberstleutnant Emil Lamberth, commander of the 106th Infantry Regiment, refused to surrender. When Patton's envoys demanded his capitulation, Lamberth's reply was chilling. "You'll have to kill me." What followed would become one of the most dramatic confrontations of the war's final days, a battle of wills, strategy, and sheer determination. To understand the gravity of this moment, we must first know the men and the stakes. Lieutenant General George S. Patton, commander of the U.S. Third Army, was a legend in his own time. Known for his aggressive tactics, uncompromising discipline, and fiery speeches, Patton's leadership had driven the Germans back across France and into their homeland. His men respected him. His enemies feared him. Opposing him was Oberstleutnant Emil Lamberth, a career officer in the Wehrmacht. Lamberth was no fanatic, but he was a soldier's soldier, loyal to his men and his oath. He commanded the 106th Infantry Regiment, a unit that had been battered in the Ardennes and now found itself defending Aschaffenburg with barely 1,000 men, many of them Volkssturm, old men and boys pressed into service. The city itself was a fortress. The main river formed a natural barrier to the north. The ancient Schloss Johannesburg, with its thick red sandstone walls, dominated the southern approach. The Germans had fortified every street, every cellar, every window. They had orders from Hitler himself: hold Aschaffenburg at all costs. For Patton, taking the city was more than a tactical objective. It was a matter of momentum. Every day the Germans held out, more American lives were lost, and the advance toward the heart of Germany was delayed. For Lamberth, surrender was unthinkable. He had his orders. He had his pride. By 0500 hours on March 28th, the 26th Infantry Division, nicknamed the Yankee Division, had surrounded Aschaffenburg. Elements of the 104th Infantry Regiment, supported by Sherman tanks from the 735th Tank Battalion and self-propelled guns from the 818th Tank Destroyer Battalion, prepared to assault the city's western edge. The weather was cold and damp. A low, gray sky pressed down on the ruined city. The air stank of cordite and burning timber. Civilians huddled in cellars, praying for the end. At 0700 hours, American artillery opened up. For 30 minutes, 105 millimeters and 155 millimeters shells rained down on the German positions. The ground shook, windows shattered. But when the infantry advanced, they met fierce resistance. German machine guns, hidden in basements and behind rubble, cut down the first wave. Panzerfaust shoulder-fired anti-tank weapons knocked out 2 Shermans at just 80 yards. By 0900 hours, the Americans had gained only a few blocks. Casualties mounted. Medics worked frantically under fire, dragging wounded men to cover. The Germans, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with desperate tenacity. Inside Schloss Johannesburg, Lamberth moved from room to room, encouraging his men. He knew the Americans would offer terms. He also knew what his orders were. When a white flag delegation arrived at the castle gate, Lamberth met them in the courtyard. "Colonel Lamberth," the American major said, "the city is surrounded. You have no hope of relief. Surrender now, and spare your men further suffering." Lamberth's reply was simple: "You'll have to kill me." Word of the defiance reached Patton's headquarters by 1100 hours. Patton, never one to tolerate delay, was furious. He ordered the 26th Division to take the city at all costs. The battle intensified. By 1400 hours, the Americans had brought up more artillery. 8-inch howitzers from the 202nd Field Artillery Battalion began pounding the castle. The deafening roar of the guns echoed across the main river. Chunks of masonry flew from the ancient walls, but the defenders held. As dusk fell, the Americans tried again. This time, they sent in flamethrower teams and combat engineers with satchel charges. The fighting was hand-to-hand, room-to-room. The Germans, many just teenagers, refused to yield. By midnight, the city center was a smoking ruin. The Americans had lost 47 men killed and over 120 wounded. The Germans had suffered even more, but still they held the castle. Little did they know, the worst was yet to come. March 29th dawned cold and gray. The Americans, exhausted and frustrated, prepared for a final assault. Patton himself arrived at the front, his presence electrifying the men. He strode through the rubble, barking orders, his ivory-handled revolvers gleaming at his side. At 0600 hours, the Americans launched a coordinated attack from 3 directions. Infantry, tanks, and engineers moved forward under a rolling barrage. The Germans, low on ammunition and food, fought back with everything they had: rifles, machine guns, even captured American bazookas. Inside the castle, conditions were dire. The wounded lay in makeshift infirmaries. Water was running out. Lambert, his uniform stained with dust and blood, refused to consider surrender. He radioed his superiors in Frankfurt. "We will hold as long as we can." By 1000 hours, the Americans had breached the outer walls. Fighting raged in the courtyards and stairwells. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of cordite. The sound of gunfire was constant, punctuated by the crash of grenades and the screams of the wounded. At 1200 hours, a Sherman tank crashed through the castle gate, its .50 caliber machine gun blazing. German soldiers fell back, some surrendering, others fighting to the last bullet. Lambert was everywhere, rallying his men, directing fire, refusing to give ground. By 1400 hours, the Americans controlled most of the city, but the castle still held. Patton, watching from forward observation post, was incensed. He ordered another ultimatum delivered. This time, the message was blunt: surrender, or we will level the castle. Lambert's reply was unchanged: "You'll have to kill me." The Americans brought up more firepower. 155mm guns from the 737th Field Artillery Battalion began a direct bombardment of the castle. The walls shook. Dust filled the air. Still, the Germans held. By 1700 hours, the situation was desperate. The Americans had lost over 80 men killed and 200 wounded. The Germans were down to their last handful of defenders. Ammunition was almost gone. The wounded cried out for water. Yet Lambert would not yield. As night fell on March 29th, Patton made a fateful decision. He ordered a psychological operation, one that would break the defenders' will without further bloodshed. At 2100 hours, American loudspeakers began broadcasting across the ruined city. The message was clear in flawless German: the war is lost. Berlin is surrounded. Your families need you alive. Surrender now, and you will be treated with honor. For hours, the message repeated. The Americans fired flares into the night sky, illuminating the castle and the shattered city. The defenders, exhausted and demoralized, listened in silence. Inside the castle, Lambert gathered his officers. He knew the end had come. His men had fought bravely. They had held out against impossible odds. But now, to continue would mean only senseless death. At 0400 hours on March 30th, a white flag appeared atop Schloss Johannesburg. The last defenders filed out, weapons stacked, faces drawn with exhaustion and defeat. Patton, informed of the surrender, ordered his men to treat the Germans with respect. They fought like soldiers, he said. Let them keep their honor. What happened next would become legendary. Patton, never one to hold a grudge, visited the castle himself. He met Lambert face to face. The two men, adversaries just hours before, saluted each other. Patton, recognizing the courage of his foe, offered Lambert a cigarette. The battle for Aschaffenburg was over. The cost had been high. In 3 days of brutal fighting, the Americans suffered 116 killed and over 300 wounded. The Germans lost more than 400 dead, with another 2,500 taken prisoner, including civilians pressed into service. Schloss Johannesburg though battered, still stood. The city of Aschaffenburg was in ruins, but the war had moved on. For the men of the 26th Infantry Division, the battle was a grim reminder of the price of victory. Oberstleutnant Emil Lamberth was taken prisoner, but his conduct earned him the respect of his captors. Many of his men survived because he chose to surrender rather than fight to the last man. Patton's decision to use psychological warfare rather than brute force saved countless lives. For his leadership during the battle, several officers of the 26th Division received the Silver Star. Medics who braved enemy fire to rescue the wounded were awarded the Bronze Star and the Distinguished Service Cross. The battle for Aschaffenburg became a case study in military academies, a lesson in the limits of fanatic resistance, the power of leadership, and the importance of humanity even in war's darkest hours. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to World War II Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.